through a greater transformation at a greater pace than most industries could adapt to, and we're still here. Some have gone away, but major newspapers are still playing a more vital role than ever. And I've spent about the last 22 years in the news industry from a digital perspective, and I think there are three principles that newspapers embrace that have really helped with this. And so I'm going to get to those in just a minute, but I want to start with an adage, which is, how do you make a small fortune in the newspaper industry? The answer is, of course, you start with a large fortune. And fortunately, as I think a lot of folks know, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post, but he's not making that the case. In fact, the Washington Post is doing quite well and is adapting to this disruption. And I think that is true for a lot of us. And at The Guardian, we don't kind of sit around complacently enamored with our legacy that has been built up in nearly 200 years, but instead we focus on what our legacy should be going forward. So it's, of course, award-winning websites and mobile apps, but it's really embracing change and what's going on. So, you know, we were at the forefront of kind of the audio off Facebook videos with our DAB videos. We have embraced ways that journalism can be told in new ways that new platforms has opened up. So in our virtual reality app, there are stories such as 6 by 9, really giving the journalism behind being in solitary confinement that you can only appreciate in a way that it viscerally puts you there, that text and pictures was never able to do before. And of course, in the realm of investigative journalism, it's no longer like Watergate with, you know, someone giving tips in a garage. With Snowden and Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers, it's gigs and terabytes of data dumps. So the technology and how you have to respond and how you do the journalism to tell the powerful story of how the rich and the powerful are getting away with things really requires adaptation. So that's the environment, and a little bit more on it is just kind of the pace of change. And so I was reflecting, like I said, I've been doing this a little over 20 years, and so I wanted to kind of look back 30 years at 10-year intervals of what was the major kind of innovation at each cycle. So 30 years back, 1987, in kind of computers, entertainment, I feel like the big invention at the time was the GIF. And of course, this as a very compact image file that would be highly useful a few years later with the invention of the World Wide Web and give us years and years of entertainment debating GIF or GIF. Not quite as disruptive as the web comes out. In 1997, Netflix comes out, not the company we know now, but one that just completely disrupts the video rental market. And what really is showing is by 1997, we had companies that were inventing new businesses online and disrupting entirely internet-based companies, really impacting what commerce looked like. 10 years ago, 2007, Apple came out with the iPhone, not the first smartphone, but the first one that really ground home the ubiquitous having the internet in your pocket all times, apps that know your context, where you are, who you are, what you're doing, and really revolutionizing this concept of how people interact with digital capabilities, since they can now do it 365, 24/7. Today, you know, if we look back in 10 years, I'm not sure for sure what the thing of 2017 will be. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, smart, you know, speakers, smart homes, autonomous vehicles, blockchain, analytics of everything. I mean, there's just so much going on, and the pace is just kind of off the chart. And really, that makes me just fully agree with Professor Jan Rotmans here with a quote: "We are not living in an era of change, but in a change of era." And for newspapers, you know, some of it, you know, okay, it sort of makes sense. So print circulations are declining, so that's being offset by digital consumption generally going up. Okay, it's a little bit more complicated because there's a lot more crowded space going on. There's kind of people disintermediating. There's a bunch of online-only folks that, you know, could be the Netflixes that are disrupting us. But even more significantly is the fact that our main revenue flow has just turned into a total mess, which is advertising. Used to be rather simple. The CPMs, of course, the actual amount people are paying per ad goes way down in general on online. But then this is what the ecosystem looks like in kind of the programmatic ad space today. So if the money is supposed to be coming from advertisers and getting through to publishers who actually then fund the journalism, this is everyone in between who is ostensibly adding value. But of course, every one of those people take money that starts at the left, and so way less gets to the right. And if that wasn't bad enough, the picture is even more grim. Over half of all the online advertising revenue in the UK goes to just two companies, Google and Facebook. Almost 90% of all new revenue is going to them. So we end up predicting by 2020, over 70% of all advertising revenue is going to end up with just these two companies. And yet, the role the newspapers are playing has never been more important, right? Brexit, elections in the UK, US, France, climate change, civil strife, dictatorships overthrown, famine, refugees crisis. In the words of our chief editor, Catherine Viner, the turbulence of our times may demand that we do more than just adapt. And so there is a lot of pressure on why we might be buckling under, a lot of pressure on why we should really be doing our jobs better than ever. And I remain optimistic. And the question is why? And this goes back to, I think there are three things that newspapers have kind of always embraced that will help us eat this disruption for breakfast and keep going. And so what are they? Number one, it's about a culture of creating, making sure you're doing things faster, more results-driven, and in a highly coordinated fashion. So historically, what has this meant at newspapers? Deadlines. The printing presses had to start up at a given time, or tens of thousands of quids go down the drain as trucks sit idle, people sit idle. So everything was geared to go faster, get all the news up to the last possible moment and get it out. You had coordination to larger goals at small centers. So you had individual news desks that had their individual things they were trying to do, but everyone was coordinating around the larger goal of getting the newspaper out. And of course, an appreciation, different skill sets and different roles. So the Panama Papers, the breaking, revelation that was not just The Guardian, it was a couple dozen newspapers working together because different folks had different aspects, different strengths that they could contribute to that story. So what does it mean to adapting to disruption in digital? Not necessarily terribly shocking, right? We do Agile. These are cross-functional teams with product, UX, design, project management. We do OKRs that coordinate top-level goals with what these kind of agile scrum huddles do at the lowest level, and make sure we're coordinated top to bottom. And most importantly is this concept of lean, making sure what we're doing and what we're building is the right thing. So if Agile lets you build faster and OKRs make sure you're coordinated, you can be coordinated and fast and build the wrong thing. Lean makes sure that you're actually testing with your audience as quick as possible and measuring it. So this is OFON. We kind of base everything and a heavy emphasis on our analytics capability. So this is our central analytics capability where we're A/B testing everything we roll out, making sure it's working, making sure our hypotheses of how things would work. And the great thing is this is getting easier and easier. This is a company we're partnering with that I quite enjoy, Visual AI, where they've productized kind of A/B testing but taken it farther with AI. So with artificial intelligence now, they're actually doing prediction layered on top of A/B testing to give you the best recommendation of what to take into tests, which is just super powerful and really interesting. I could spend a lot of time talking about this, but hey, there's books. I recommend these. So Sutherland's on Scrum. Eric Ries is the founder of Lean and now has kind of what current companies should think about as far as Lean, and of course, Schmidt's book on how Google works and OKRs. So what is number two? Focus on your audience. Some people talk about being audience obsessed or customer obsessed, but it can lead you down a dangerous path, I think, of where I hear people talk about the audience has loyalty. And that means you're not actually in a partnership with them. You're not actually focusing on what their needs are and making sure that they are met and yours met. Again, newspapers have been critically keen on doing this over the years. Circulation numbers have kind of been the lifeblood of newspapers, how they compare it against the competition for advertising, how they're actually selling at the newsstand. If you look at any online newspaper today, of course, they have most popular sections on the line. but I don't think any major newspaper is viewing it from a how do we just do the most populist news, but they all have internal systems like OFAN where we're actually breaking down what's serving really well so that our journalists can figure out how to tell the important stories better, not just serve kind of the highly fat and sugar-laden stories up that works for BuzzFeed and others. So a bit more on it is really, again, partnering with the audience, having a relationship with us. And so we've been on a 3-year strategic effort that we've talked about building a reader relationship, growing the relationship with the readers much deeper, and having them help us reimagine our journalism, help us with a sustainable business model despite the challenges I've talked about in advertising, and a commitment to digital innovation to connect our journalism with the readers of tomorrow. And it's been working great. We've got 800,000 supporters in the past year from more than 140 countries who have directly given money to us either through contributions or digital subscriptions, paper subscriptions. Well over half of our revenue is now coming directly from readers. But financials is only part of the picture. As I said, there is also other things that folks can do. So you kind of need to start with an audience journey. I would say this isn't groundbreaking, thinking about how people discover you, become more engaged, and have more of a habit. But for us, at every stage, we're thinking about this bidirectional relationship and what can be brought. So we think about our readers heavily. What are they trying to get at each of the stages of the journey from The Guardian? And understanding that really it typically boils down to 3 things. They're trying to understand and make sense of the world, first and foremost. What the heck is going on? 2, they're trying to understand how they can make change in the world. So with this information, is there anything I can do? And then admittedly, sometimes number 3, they are just looking to be entertained a little bit. If they only get hit with the most oppressive news all the time, leaves them a little unmotivated, shall we say. From our standpoint at The Guardian, yes, there's the financial aspect that we want to help make sure readers are helping us stay viable. But we do actually want them to help with our journalism, and of course, for the people who are kind of most we're most part of their lives, they can be the best advocates in helping introduce new readers and make this a virtuous circle. So let's dwell on that second one. How can they make the journalism better? So we have a tool out now for our journalists that they're using on a regular basis. When they write a story, they know the topic deeply, but sometimes it's hard to know how well do the readers understand this. Am I making it too simple? Am I making it too complex? So at the end of a story now, they can post 3 questions that they haven't taken the time to answer, but they're just wondering, are our readers having these as questions? Within the first hour or 2 of the story being posted, they can quickly see as readers click on which ones they actually want to ask, what are, if any, and sometimes there's not, but there's usually high engagement on 1 or 2 of them, what are the questions that the readers really care about? They can then quickly answer that. Anyone who clicked on it before the answer was published can get it by email, and it goes through. So they typically then result in 4 different types of answers, either quick guides, QAs, profiles, or timelines. Again, it starts with need something more explained and some questions. So, examples that have recently shown up is really explaining who Grace Mugabe is and why she's controversial. How much trouble is Angela Merkel in Germany? What is a hard Brexit, etc. And the great things is these are then kind of durable bits of factoid that can be embedded in any future stories on that topic. So we've really gotten a sense from our audience what they need better explained, and making sure we are doing it in an effective fashion. Okay, so number 3, build future-proof systems. Easy to say, right? But you break that down, and it's really about having modular systems that are reusable and that are built in their premise to enable change. So again, I think newspapers have a good history of this. So printing presses over 200 years, pretty resilient. Yes, a lot of changes, but basically how they work kept going and was able to improve. Reporters were always good at maintaining their contact lists and making sure they kept all of their notes because you never knew when that stuff was going to be needed in the future. But even more importantly, and hidden to most readers, is every major newspaper typically had a whole library system behind them where they would archive everything and make sure that everything was going to be available for future use. So in the digital space, what does this mean? We have to start with 3 letters, API, Application Programming Interface. It's not a silver bullet in itself, but if you build APIs around all your systems, you're on a good path to having future-proof systems. And if you build application programming interfaces such that third parties could use them, it doesn't actually matter if they do, but if they could use them, you're starting to think about things like deprecation. You're starting to think about really making modular bits with clean interfaces that can be swapped out later so that you can just change out individual components of the engine rather than being stuck and moribund with an entire engine that you have to change out. So for us, we have APIs wrapped around everything. We have mobile APIs, identity APIs, commenting APIs, analytics, subscription, all key data is wrapped in APIs. And this is, in fact, our content API, which is open and available to the public at that URL down there. And as you see there, it has access to nearly 2 million pieces of content. And that really emphasizes the next point. All of our content is stored in a way that is platform agnostic. We don't, yes, we know we're going to print every day on paper and ink. We know there's going to be a website. Whatever, 8 years ago, along came mobile apps. Oop, we need to publish on mobile apps now. Now we have these kind of smart home and different smart devices that require new formats. And if all of our content was like stored in HTML in a way we couldn't reuse it, we'd be totally screwed. This is really expensive stuff. We spend the vast majority of our money making content. We need to make sure that we are ready at a moment's notice to be able to publish it anywhere else. And then finally, making sure your systems are encouraging change themselves. So one last time at OFAN, and really watching the signals of where disruption is coming, but also sticking the information in front of the entire staff on what they need to do to change. So one of the things we see is changing audience behavior. We're focused on our audience, and so we see that different folks are consuming data or content journalism in different ways. And one of the things we've been really evaluating is what is the right story length for the right audience and the right type of journalism. So this is in OFAN on a particular story. That article had 631 words. So we're sticking right in front of the journalist's nose that, hey, your story would take on average 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes to read. Guess what? The average reading time was 31 seconds. You did not actually serve the story in a way that engaged and worked for the audience. So we're trying to do change, and we're making sure we're sticking the data in a way that's going to be useful. And people say data is the new oil or whatever, but data is only useful if it actually drives change. And then finally, I will say I have a bonus one. Never fail to leverage a crisis. One more adage: there are 3 kinds of people who run towards a disaster, not away: cops, firemen, and reporters. And so, the fire that I'm certainly dealing with right now is GDPR. I'm sure many in the room are as well. Which is a whole lot of work and a lot of difficulty. But for us, we really see it as an opportunity. And that's the key to all these disruptions, is seizing and looking for what is the opportunity, not how do we defend against, but what's the opportunity. And for us, this is about having a better relationship. And we're best positioned, we think, to have a relationship where the audience should trust us. So being really clear on how folks can manage their data with us. So that's it. Thanks.
Questions? Do we have any questions? We've got a few minutes for any questions. Okay, a bit of a minefield here, but I'll go for it.
Is that a great presentation? Thank you. My name's Jerry Brown. I'm interested in one of your earlier comments about the fact that the vast majority of advertising is going to Google and Facebook.
Yeah.
When you think about the positioning of what you do from a Guardian perspective and what you bring to the audience and compared to what I think they bring, and they'll probably disagree with that, it feels to me there's a vast difference in why people would want to pay for information from you as opposed to those guys. How do you see that playing out in the future in terms of what you are providing that will encourage people to either advertise or pay for content?
Yeah, great question. And we're not abandoning advertising. We're just recognizing that we can't be so dependent on it in the future. And so programmatic advertising, where the advertisers who are where it's going up, they're bidding in real time and trying to get the cheapest price of where they can stick what they basically put in as criteria for the audience they're looking for, really has no contextual awareness to it. And so, I think for a lot of advertisers, it does matter what kind of environment their ad shows up, not just who is the audience that's reading it. So if you're Mercedes, there's some really trashy websites out there. Do you really want your ad showing up in those environments? So I think there is a little bit of a backlash that we are certainly trying to create the opportunity and work in the programmatic ad space to make sure that anyone that's in the supply chain is providing value, but we're making sure that the data signals of the quality environment goes out, actually trickles back to the other side, up to the advertisers, so they can see that. And working with others, because there is a challenge here that for a lot of folks, it's about a scale question, and Google and Facebook just offer a large scale. So we recognize that we can't go it alone. So in fact, we are working with some people that would historically be considered our prime competitors, because we do believe that quality journalism needs to be funded. And in some of this, it's better if we go together. So we have a number of efforts to solve both the scale question and make sure that one of the criteria in programmatic ad buying is actually understanding the quality of the environment you're landing in. So those are two of the key themes we're working on in those space.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm really interested in the data systems that you showed us. And you say kind of how long somebody spent paying attention to an article. Mm-hmm. The question then is, why did they only spend 31 seconds on that article? What are you doing to ask that why? Do you have any sort of language processing? Are you identifying any particular patterns? And how are you visualizing those?
Yeah, also a great question. So I'm a techie guy. My background was in engineering, but 20 years in the news industry has taught me it is where machines and people work best together gets you the best results. At my last job at NPR, actually, we ran the A/B tests of the best kind of pure computer algorithms to spit out a listening sequence versus what the editors could do. And actually, when we found ways to put the two of them together, the results were always the best. And so to answer your question, in fact, we don't actually need the computer algorithms to solve that. You put a good editor on it, and they look at it, and they can explain to the journalists, this is what you did wrong. So it's getting their attention initially. And if we're not sure, we then can A/B test it. And so the vast majority of times, frankly, if people really look at it and say, wait, this was broken, what could have been wrong with it, they have the answer. But when we're not certain, then we experiment.
Yeah. If there's any more questions, I think Zach's sticking around for a bit, so catch him there. Thank you, Zach. If we could put our hands together one more time, thank you.